Hello and welcome to your video lesson for your homework. It goes along with this handout that you received in class. We'll be talking about the 10 criteria of truth and the 4 qualities and abilities for recognizing truth. In this lesson, we are going, as I just said, to be talking about the criteria for truth. We've been talking about truth in class. We've said that truth is transcendent. It comes from outside of us, and at the same time we can perceive truth. And so we need to answer the question, if God created us with the ability to perceive truth, what criteria must truth follow? And so by the end of this video lesson, you should be able to recognize and describe the criteria for truth, and also recognize the qualities and abilities that enable humans to recognize truth. So let's go ahead and get started. Pull out your handout, make sure you have that. Feel free to pause this video as we go through to get caught up in notes or to write questions or comments on your paper that you would like to contribute to our class discussion in our next class period. I want to encourage you as we fill in the blanks, don't just sit there and wait for the word to pop up on the screen, but try to guess, keep your mind engaged so that you're better prepared to use this information, not only in our next class period, but also throughout the year. Again, we're asking the question, what are some criteria of truth? What must something be in order to be truth? Again, use your handout to collect the information. Truth is something that we can perceive, and to perceive it, we want to make sure that it's based on the following criteria. This is information that I'm sure you've thought of. It's not new. We're just trying to organize it in a useful way. First of all, truth should conform to the real world. It has to work. So we say that truth is practical. Truth has to be practical. No matter how good something sounds, if it simply doesn't work, then it is not truth. If it doesn't work in the real world, then it can't be classified as truth. A proverb, for example, would fit this criteria. Those pithy sayings, not just found in the book of Proverbs, but also like the ones recorded by Ben Franklin in Poor Richard's Almanac. Ben Franklin said, for example, where there is no law, there is no bread. And that proverb suggests that law and order is the best way for people to provide for their own needs. Now that makes sense. That works in our real world. It isn't in the Bible, but it conforms to our real world, and so it's practical, and therefore it can be classified as truth. Truth also needs to work and function with what is. We have to be able to live with it. Sometimes we say things like, well, in a perfect world, such and such would be true. In a perfect world, I would be king. And of course, I'm sure we've heard that statement before, and the response is always, well, this isn't a perfect world. And that just points out this fact that truth must be sensible. Truth must be sensible. It has to be true right now. It has to work and function in the world that we have right now. Not in a perfect world scenario, but it has to make sense with the way things are in our world right now. It has to be sensible. Another criteria for truth is that truth has to be something that we can count on. It has to be dependable. If it is true today, it will be true tomorrow, and it will be true the next day. We say that truth is consistent, the same all the time. An example of a consistent truth is that water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That's considered truth. It's been true forever. Even before we knew the exact temperature, that is still the temperature that water boiled at. And it will be true forever. We all understand that there are factors that may change the boiling point, but even those factors can be pointed out, and we know how it affects the boiling point of water. So that is considered to be a consistent truth. Another criteria of truth is that it needs to be true for all people in all places, at all times, in all cultures. Everywhere in the universe, it needs to be true. So, for example, what goes up must come down. That's considered a truth because it follows the law of gravity. No matter who you are, when you have lived, where you have lived, or what culture you've lived in, you've experienced the effects of gravity. So we say that truth is universal. Truth has to be universal, true for all people, all places, all times. Another criteria for truth is that it must be superior when compared to other truths. And notice that that word is in quotation marks, because sometimes someone might say, well, it's my truth, and my truth might be different than your truth. For example, some may believe that killing your enemy is the best way to go. It kind of makes sense. If someone bothers you, if they get in your way, if they're making your life hard, the best way to deal with it is just to simply get rid of them, knock them off. Survival of the fittest. But then other people preach that you are to love your enemy. So which is truth? We discover true truth through comparison. So we could say that truth is comparable. By the way, if we practice the first truth, that I could kill my enemy, if I did kill my enemy, that would make my enemy's friends my new enemy, and then they would seek to kill me, and my friends would then seek to kill those who killed me, and we would start a never-ending cycle of violence. However, if I destroy my enemy by loving them and making them my friend, it leads to a cycle of peace. So which truth is ultimately best? We used the fact that truth is comparable, and when you compare them, you find a superior truth, and that leads us to the perception of truth. So truth must be comparable. A sixth criteria of truth is that truth is valid or false just by being there. Truth defines what is valid or false just by being there. So we say that truth is exclusive. A person cannot be both loving and hateful. Hate is determined by the existence of love. Dark is determined by the absence of light. So because love and light exist as truths, then hatred and darkness can also be determined as truth. Truth is also able to withstand intellectual and historical tests. For example, I might be able to tell you that the ice cream cone was invented at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis when a Syrian immigrant selling waffles noticed that the next vendor had run out of plates to serve his ice cream on. And so they partnered up. He sold waffles and the other guy sold ice cream. They put them together and made the ice cream cone. Now, you could believe that, but that is only considered truth when we look it up or when we verify it. We talk to the eyewitnesses, we read the documentation, we check the sources, and so we say that truth must be verifiable. The next two are ones that we have discussed already. Number 8, we've talked about the fact that truth cannot be altered to fit our circumstances. It does not change, and so we say that truth is absolute. And number 9, we've also talked about saying that truth originates outside of human reason and that it is transcendent. And finally, number 10, the 10th criteria for truth, is that truth is truth because it is true, not just because we have thought it up. Subjective means existing in the mind, so a figment of our imagination, or it seems that way because we've thought it, or because we've experienced it. It's not based on subjective or experiential criteria, but it is objective. There is an object, a real thing, that is truth. Truth is objective. These 10 are criteria that something should fall into in order to be considered true. And by employing these, we can properly perceive what is truth. In addition to these criteria, God has given us the ability to perceive truth by giving us certain qualities or abilities to determine truth. These are found in the next segment of your handout, and we'll follow the same method. There are only 4 broad categories that we'll cover. First of all, God has gifted us with the ability to perceive truth by giving us our senses. We can make observations by using our senses. He has given us what we call observation skills to understand or to perceive truth. Now, of course, we can use these incorrectly, and these have limitations. Remember the 6 blind men of Indostan that we read about in the poem the other day, trying to perceive truth about an elephant that they hadn't seen? The same can happen to us, but our observation skills are useful in perceiving truth when they're used correctly. God has also given us the ability to perceive truth by using our logic and reason. He has given us thinking skills. When we contemplate and discover with our minds, we are arriving at truth. By thinking through problems, we can arrive at truth. Math, for example, would be an example of thinking skills. 2 plus 2 equals 4. We arrive at truth by using the ability that God gave us to think. Another quality of truth, or ability that God has given us for perceiving truth, is common sense. By thinking about what conforms to our ordinary and usual life experiences, we can arrive at truth. By asking ourselves what makes sense, what is logical in this example, it helps us understand what is true. It is true that we should put our socks on before we put our shoes on. Now, you won't find a verse in the Bible that supports that, but it's truth nonetheless because it's common sense. And the final quality or ability that we have for truth is that we can perceive truth by considering what our standard of conduct should be. God has given us a tool that we call a conscience. It is the part of us that is bothered when we know we are doing something wrong, and it is the part that reassures us when we're doing something right. By listening to our conscience, we can know what is true. Please understand that these 10 criteria and these 4 qualities do not guarantee that we'll get it right all the time. We still have limitations. We are never a source of truth in ourselves. But by using these things carefully and consistently, we can come closer to perceiving truth in God's world. So be sure to record your questions or thoughts that you have about these things. We'll expand on this a little bit in class and discuss it in our next class period. And so be sure to write down your questions or thoughts so that you're prepared to participate in our next class period. Thank you.